Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Jai. Jai. Jai.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamanyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamcha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saragana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Rachakantana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavameshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalapalabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. So many were anxiously awaiting Prashadam. I was anxiously awaiting Mataji's Kirtan. Thank you for blessing all of us. So, we'll continue our discussion of chapter 14. So last week discussed verses 7 and 8. 7 and 8. Okay, so this one's 9. So, huh?
8 and 9. 8 and 9 we did.
8 and 9 we did?
10 we did.
So we'll do 10? Okay. So let's start with 10. So, just a little bit of backup, the three modes of material nature. So, what are the three modes? Let's start with something easy. What are the three modes? Goodness, ignorance, and passion. And we know that each mode is binding, right, by different features. And when we say binding, what does that mean? Like glue holding two things together? What do we mean by binding?
Convection.
Huh?
Convection.
Convection, yeah.
Closeness.
Okay. But when we say the modes of material nature are binding us, what does that mean?
That
We're
subject to their influence.
Okay, so we're subject to our influence, which ties us to the material world. It keeps us here within the material world. Sometimes we think, oh, gravity is keeping us here. Without gravity, we could fly. That is not what's keeping us here. It is the modes of material nature. Anybody sees the modes of material nature? You look around, you see them?
Your experience. Nature.
They're very subtle, right? So they're not visible to the eye, but they're perceptible. We can know how they are influencing us by understanding the nature of the modes. But just like the law of karma, the law of karma is very detailed and specific. We can understand the general concept. You know, when we do some activity, we cannot know exactly what the karmic reaction will be. Or if we receive some reaction, we don't know, well, what it is I did to generate that reaction. But we can understand that the reaction is equal and opposite to the initial input. And that the reaction is never too much or too little. We can understand this general concept. Maybe we can understand the reactions sometimes come long in the future, sometimes they come very quickly. These things. So like that, the three modes of material nature are also like that. They're very detailed and intricate. So we can understand the broad concepts, the general ideas. But the fine details of the three, it's very subtle and detailed. So, you know, we're not going to get hung up on some of the really intricate individual aspects of them. But what we want to walk away from studying these three modes of material nature is that they are binding us to the material world. They are keeping us here. And the goal that we have is to how to become free from the influence of the three modes. So just as we need to know the laws of karma so that we can then make good decisions, you know, similarly we need to understand in some level of detail each of these three modes so that we can see which modes are acting upon us. The goal of understanding where am I, we know, is to then progress to ultimately becoming free from the modes. Because when one is free from the modes, Krishna is going to explain at the end of this chapter what the results of that are. And it is great bliss and happiness. Right? And we know, is it easy to become free from the modes? But the process is very simple. And what is that process? Bhakti. And what process within bhakti is most simple and most powerful? But not easy. So actually becoming free from the modes of material nature is a simple process. Chant the holy names of the Lord very nicely, and we'll become free. Right? And the overarching understanding of that I'm not free from the modes of material nature, I have these material attachments I can't let go of. And I try to shake like, you know, a piece of gum is stuck on your hand, you can't get rid of it. That is the modes of material nature. And I have these attachments and I can't shake free of them. Right? So that is the glue that is holding us to all of them is one of the three modes. So we've discussed now goodness, passion, and ignorance, right? So just a quick summary. What is the binding effect of, how does goodness bind us?
Positive karma.
Pleasure. We enjoy goodness, or usually happy or successful, or things look good.
So things look good, we're relatively happy and successful, relative to others. And how does that feature bind us?
The attachment to that goodness.
You can attach to that. And how does it hold us here? How does it keep us from?
We get good karma.
We get good karma. That's why we get good happiness, because we have some knowledge, right, of what to do, what not to do.
No motivation to come out of it because I'm happy. It's relative.
It's the A-class jail cell prisoner. I've got a better cell than the others, so this must be the best of all. But when we say that mode of goodness is bound by knowledge, they don't have complete knowledge. Because they're missing what is life outside of the prison house. Right? So, bound by this relative sense of happiness and the knowledge they have. I have more knowledge than anybody else within the prison house. I have the best facilities within the prison house. So what's my motivation to? Try to go beyond. Right? So that's what binds. What is binding in the mode of passion? What is the specific binding force?
Lust.
Lust. Okay. But what binds us? Yeah, so lust leads to what?
Desires.
Desires leads to
Expectations.
expectations, anger. What? Anger. Greed. But when I have so many desires, what am I then
Suffering.
inspired to do?
To fulfill action.
Fulfill them. And how do I fulfill them?
Action.
Action. So by this intense endeavor, I'm so busy working, trying to fulfill one or two of my desires. Millions of desires, right? And what happens when we fulfill one, we're good?
No desires.
Another one, and another one, right? So in the mode of passion, one is bound by activity. Activity to fulfill all the desires that are fueled by lust, that result in greed and anger, but it is bound by activity. And what is the binding force in ignorance?
Lethargy. Laziness.
Laziness,
Inaction.
inaction. So how does that bind us? It's almost obvious, but
Sleep. No, we don't do anything.
we don't do anything. And as we heard last week, the real dangerous position, what is the real dangerous position of the mode of ignorance?
Degrade.
Madness.
Huh?
You can degrade to a lower species.
You can degrade to a lower species. And what is the, why is it very hard for someone in the mode of ignorance to come out of that position?
Because they think they are right. They don't they think they are.
It's the killer of all instances, right? At least if it's true ignorance, I don't know, it's one thing. But the problem is, in mode of ignorance, one is convinced they are right, when in reality, they are wrong. And that is the worst of all scenarios, right? At least if I have some uncertainty, there's a scope to now place some knowledge. But if one is convinced they are right, then what can you do? But they are convinced what they are doing is right, and they are equally convinced what one in spiritual life is doing is wrong. It's like the double whammy. It is the double whammy. So, when Srila Prabhupada says, basically the whole world is in the mode of ignorance, is that such a far-fetched statement? Most of the world is convinced they're on the right track. Eat, sleep, and be merry. Is that not the same? You can add eat, drink, sleep, and be merry. Right? That is like the revolving. What is happening this Friday evening? It is now 8:43. Now post-COVID. What are full right now? Bhakti Riksha houses?
Today, yes.
Today, yes. And what are full is all places of intoxication, right? Because that is the goal. So, that is why Prabhupada says, mode of ignorance and mode of passion are predominant. It is the vast majority. But is it hopeless if we are in the mode of ignorance? Is it hopeless even though it's such a precarious position? I'm convinced I'm right and I'm convinced they're wrong. Is it hopeless? What is our hope? What is our lifeline?
Krishna's mercy.
Krishna's mercy. Specifically, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Krishna came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give hope to the hopeless. He gave hope to the hopeless. And that is why actually no one is in an unsavable position. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said every town and village. What is happening in every town and village in the world? Mode of ignorance. So by the power of the holy names, they'll be delivered. Right? Okay, so let's read verse 10. Let's read the verse. Reciters are otherwise occupied. So now 3.
रजस तमस चाहिए भूया सत्वम भवति भरत रजः सत्वम तमश्चैव तमः सत्वम रजस तथा. Sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance, O son of Bharata. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times, ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy.
When the mode of passion is prominent, the mode of goodness and ignorance are defeated. When the mode of goodness is prominent, the passion and the ignorance are defeated. And when the mode of ignorance is prominent, the passion and the goodness are defeated. This competition is always going on. Therefore, one who is actually intent on advancing in Krishna consciousness has to transcend these three modes. The prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifested in one's dealings, in his activities, in eating, etc. All this will be explained in later chapters, but if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the mode of ignorance and the passion. One can similarly develop the mode of passion and defeat the goodness and the ignorance. Or one can develop the mode of ignorance and defeat the goodness and the passion. Although there are these three modes of material nature, if one is determined, he can be blessed by the mode of goodness, and by transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in the pure goodness, which is called Vasudeva state, a state in which one can understand the science of God. By the manifestation of particular activities, he can be understood in what mode of nature one is situated.
So, the three modes. What is happening between them? Competition, right? One is trying to become supreme. So a couple of important points here. First, are we exclusively in one of the modes? We have tinges of all three. And we had a practical experience, right? Someday we wake up, yes, really motivated, want to do something good for society, for humanity, for myself. Other days, we become so engrossed in our, activity. We become very volatile and emotional and maybe hyper and that. And other days, I'm just going to stare at the ceiling and relax. Success will be if I can sleep until noon tomorrow. Then it'll be success. Right? So we've had all three states, and it can change. So, Acharya's comment that it's important to recognize that we have bits of all three modes within us. We are a combination of all three. Just like there are three primary colors. And when you mix the three primary colors in different ways, you get unlimited number of different colors. Because you can put, more of one color and less of another in the middle, and then mix, that'll be one color. One new color will manifest. And then you can switch the formula around. There's unlimited permutations, right? With just three basic primary colors. So similarly, there are unlimited permutations. We are each our own individual sequence of the three modes. Right? So the question is now, are we born with it? Is it like our genetic code? It's like some code we are born with? These three modes? Or is it fixed or does it change? It can change, right? And what changes the three modes?
Association.
Association. How does association change it? Huh?
If there's a good association, the life then will be good.
Yeah. And if there's bad association? Why is it that we always want our children to associate with good children? Why?
Yeah.
They're impressionable.
Power of association.
Right? We don't want our child to change their nature, their activities, their behavior, right? But how come as adults we think, oh no, I'm now fixed? We don't worry about our own association, right? But it's there. And so the modes change. So if we've come to the mode of goodness, okay, now I'm predominant. How can I tell which mode I'm in? What does Prabhupada tell us? How can we evaluate what mode I'm in?
Particular activity.
My activities and different things that we do. That Krishna is going to explain, as Prabhupada says in later chapters. The foods we eat. You know, one in the mode of goodness is attracted to certain types of foods. One in the mode of ignorance, a different type. And some in the mode of passion, a third type. Right? So we see, right? And you have different varieties of foods. And some are attracted to very healthy foods. Some are attracted to very unhealthy foods. Some are attracted to very spicy foods. They all have different tastes. Right? But that taste is based on the modes. Different activities. Some enjoy getting up very early in the morning and going for a wonderful nature walk and observing and practicing yoga and doing, you know, things that are generally considered in the mode of goodness. And others like to end their day around that time, having, you know, partied into the night. Right? Each his own. Right? Everybody has different. So we can see by the activities which mode I'm. So it's not aspirational. You know, it's not something we dream. We have to evaluate based on our activities. And how to do that will be coming up later in the Bhagavad Gita. But the point is that the modes are perceptible by us in terms of where we are. It's very tangible. It's not much speculation. But, you know, if I'm fixed in the mode of goodness, am I secure? Am I safe?
It's changeable.
It's changeable. And what could happen?
Like
Situation.
birth and death. Again.
Birth and death. So, I mean,
Association.
your point is mode of goodness, fixed in mode of goodness, is not a perfect solution. Why?
Because we have to go through this material life again and again, and there is a chance of degrading from the mode of goodness to passion and ignorance.
So I have the best material position possible in the mode of goodness. But two things. I'm still in the prison house. I still have birth and death, old age and disease. Yeah, maybe a slightly less degree. But who is happy with that? 100% happiness and 0% distress. So that's one downside. And the other issue is that you can degrade. You can fall back to the lower modes. Right? Now the flip side, if one is in the mode of ignorance, is it hopeless? They also can decrease, right? So these modes are constantly competing for supremacy. Right? And what we associate with, what we do, will determine where we are going to go. So what is Prabhupada's recommendation? Come to the mode of goodness?
Transcend.
And why transcend the modes?
The modes are material. they, dictate everything that trickles down throughout the manifestation.
The modes are material. Everything in the material world we learned in the 8th chapter is Prakalayam. Krishna, if we go back to those verses, he makes a very important point. He says from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest. He says, does anybody remember what he said? Huh? Suffering, miseries. But he said, full of miseries. He says, full of it. He doesn't say, okay, a little bit here. He says, full of miseries. Why is Krishna telling us that?
So we're not aspired to take births on higher planets.
We're not aspiring to chase after something that looks good relative to maybe where we are today. Oh, going to some of the higher planets, Brahma Loka. We talk about these Swarga Loka. All the it looks nice, but actually, how does it compare to the spiritual world? The prisoner in a C-class jail cell. What should be their ultimate goal?
Freedom.
Get out of jail. Get out. Okay, yes, maybe there's a progression, okay, but don't stop at the A-class. Get out. So Krishna told us. And then anybody remember the title of that chapter, the 8th chapter? You can look it up. Attaining the Supreme.
Yes.
It's very interesting that Krishna had to define what is supreme. Why? Because we all have our own ideas of what is supreme. Oh, if I had $1 billion, I'd be supreme. We have all kinds of ideas of what is supreme. So Krishna said, no, this is the supreme. And then he proved it to us by explaining the material world and everything, right? So Prabhupada is telling us that in order to attain the supreme, we must transcend the modes. So coming just to the mode of goodness, being, very pious, following different shastra injunctions for karma, kanda, sacrifices, is better than mode of passion and ignorance, no doubt. But ultimately, it's not a secure position because of this. That mode of passion and ignorance is waiting to strike and to suppress that mode of goodness within us. And then we are doomed. So, this opportunity that Krishna is going to tell us by the end of this chapter, go beyond the modes. We must transcend the modes. So that must be the fundamental, the only reason to understudy this 3 modes of material nature is to help us get beyond the modes. And we should not confuse bhakti with the mode of goodness. There's so much confusion about that. We should be very clear. When the object is Krishna, it is transcendental to the modes. And that's why Prabhupada uses the term, this Vasudeva state. What is the other name Krishna Prabhupada uses or Acharyas use for the mode of?
Shuddha Sattva.
Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness. Because when one is in Sattva Gun, remember, it's not pure. There's still tinges of the other 2 modes. So only when one comes to devotional service, one can become in pure goodness. Okay? So that's the mixing of the modes and the importance of making sure. So this kind of ends this section of this chapter. And now Krishna is going to begin to speak about how to identify these modes, and then what is the result of dying in these different modes, and more detail will be given coming up in the next 15 or so verses. verses. And then the conclusion of this chapter, how to transcend. Any questions or comments from today's verse? Discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
We talked about what the behavior of our behavior determines the mode which we are in, correct? Now, for example, we're talking about now eating prashadam. Now, if one is honoring something which is very spicy and they have liking towards spicy things, so that then can one conclude and evaluate that despite that it is kind of a offered thing, still one is in the kind of a mode of passion.
So, this is described in Srimad Bhagavatam that, our devotional service, until it comes to the point of pure devotional service, can have these tinges of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And it's, I believe it's with the discussion of Kapil Muni and Devavati. He explains devotional service. Devavati is actually asking about these different categories of devotional service. And there it's explained how we can be in devotional service, but we can have the tinges of these the kind of impurities, if you will, of these modes. When it comes to things like prashadam, again, our idea should be that we are cooking what Krishna likes. So how spicy does he like it? What's just picking on the spice factor. But yeah, again, within reasonable tolerance zones, yeah, there's different tastes. Some enjoy a little bit more spicy prasad, some enjoy a little bit more bland. Within a reasonable range, it's all acceptable. It's in the extremes that we become, where it becomes a little bit dangerous, more than it becomes in passion. Same thing, like overindulging in prasad. Now, Prabhupada on one hand said how much prasad we should take?
The neck.
Up to the neck. That is the leeway. But Prabhupada also said, we should watch our intake, watch our health, watch our body, because the body is a temple, and it's also a vehicle to render service. Right? So while we say I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, it doesn't mean that one should ignore the body as well. It's an important vehicle. Right? We don't obsess about it. We should maintain it in a healthy state, so that like that, there's different impurities that can come into our process of devotional service that we should try to ultimately become free from.
Thank you.
So Prabhu, to learn in the graphic way, if suppose the scale of 1 to 10, the 10 is the transcendental number, So where this those three modes of material nature will come?
I don't know. Goodness would be less than that, and passion would be less than goodness, and ignorance would be less than passion. Right? So it's a degree, but
what is the how far the goodness will be from the transcendental?
That was the point I was going to make. Is if you wanted to scale it, I don't know. Ignorance would be 0.0, passion would be 0.001, goodness would be 0.002,
So still in zero.
and bhakti would be 10. It's not even close. It's not even, just to put it in context, how our acharyas have commented, to try to put it in some context. If you take all of the happiness that exists in the whole of the material world from the three modes of material nature, you take all of that happiness and you combine it and say it would amount to how much water can be held within the hoof print of a cat. So when a cat walks, it makes an indentation in the dirt, And then when it rains, the water accumulates, and that whatever water that's accumulated, that's about the total of the whole material creation. And how much happiness there is in bhakti?
Ocean.
It's an ocean. So now what has more water, an ocean or water within the hoofprint of a cat? Right? So the differences are staggering. And the differences even within bhakti become very staggering. The experience of going to Vaikuntha, this liberation, it's a very extraordinary accomplishment, right? That's, compared to living in the mode of ignorance, goodness, and passion, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment. But the happiness experienced from love of Krishna makes liberation feel very small. It's not small. It's significant. But the happiness from bhakti is so superior. Just like if you're walking in New York City on the street and you see this, your neck hurts because big, tall buildings. But then on your flight home, you're flying. Those buildings look like small Lego pieces. Are they big or are they small? Depends on where your perspective is. Okay? So from the perspective of pure bhakti, pure devotional service and love, everything is small because it's so fulfilling. So the gap is huge from goodness to pure bhakti. It's
So Prabhuji, I have a question. So when somebody reaches the pure bhakti stage, there is no change in them once they reach to that stage. Like these three things changes. Then once they reach that stage, that's it. They can't. Because based on the association, based on the daily activities, karma.
Krishna says, "My devotee never perishes." Right? So one comes to the point of pure devotional service, because it's so enriching and overwhelming in his happiness and experience that nothing else. The explanation is given by Rupa Goswami. He says, Sandarana Visheshatma, that the happiness of this it's so dense that nothing else can enter it. Like if you have an iron ball and you take a needle and you try to inject, can you inject anything? It's so dead. But if you have a ripe orange and you stick the same needle in, can you inject? Because it's not dead. Right? There's room for other things. So in our developing state, there's still room for other attractions. But when one reaches the pure bhakti state, it's so sweet and happy that there's nothing else can enter, and one becomes safe. But still, the devotee feels a significant amount of respect and healthy fear from Maya. And we know Prabhupada would pray daily, "Please don't let me fall down." He was beyond the potential to fall. But still, his mood, he never took his eye off the ball. So we should have a healthy amount, I emphasize healthy amount, of fear. Let me not fall from this position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
How much hope is there a person is in ignorance? How much hope is there for the person to come up to this bhakti level? I mean, they start doing devotional service, but still, it's going to be a big time, right?
How much hope was there for Jagai and Madai? They were the most heinous of sinful characters. But they became pure devotees.
They had Nityananda.
You don't have Lord Nityananda. Who's standing with you? We perceive a difference between Lord Nityananda here and Lord Nityananda and Navadvip walking the streets. But there's no difference. No difference. We have Lord Nityananda also. We have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We have Srila Prabhupada. We have Guru Maharaj. We have so many facilities. We have a golden road to perfection, actually. You think about it. Think about 50 years ago. How many temples were there? Think about if you wanted to reach Srimad Bhagavatam. What hope we would have. Think you wanted to hear a class. How difficult it would be. If you wanted to see some darshan, you can see the whole world darshan on your phone. We have so many facilities. We have a golden road. We have Prabhupada's guarantee. So, there is absolute hope, and we should be convinced we have a golden road in front of us. It is only up to us to walk that road. And we don't even have to walk, we just have to stay on it. It's like those moving walkways. It's moving. We just have to. So there's great hope. No one, no matter how fallen they may be, is precluded. If you see Srila Prabhupada, he wasn't preaching to those in the mode of goodness. He wasn't even preaching to those in the mode of passion. They were fully in ignorance. Right? Heavy intoxication.
Drug addicts.
What's that?
Most of them are drug addicts.
Drug addicts. And turned them into pure Vaishnavas and Vaishnavas. So we have, yes, we could have that's, history. It's not history, it's fact. But we also have recent. So, but that's the mercy of Krishna. And we shouldn't underestimate the power and mercy of Krishna. So it's never hopeless. It's all within our hands. The only question is, do I want it or not? What is the intensity of my desire? In the material world, I may desire to be a professional cricket player or a tennis player. But regardless of my desire, it may not happen if I don't have the physical forms to allow that. Right? My desire isn't sufficient because there are limitations. Right? I may have a desire to be an astrophysicist, but if I'm not good in math, no matter how good my desire is, how strong, it's not likely to happen. But still, we see in the material world, people dealt with a so-called lesser hand by strong desire can overcome all odds and do amazing things. But in bhakti, one can be even a dog eater. Most fallen of fallen. And still have perfect opportunity. So, mode of ignorance, we should understand it, we should become free from it, and we should know we have a very powerful tool. Right? Just like your car is in the driveway. If you go out and try to lift your car, can you lift it? But in your trunk, you have a jack. And you take that jack and you just turn it a few times. Can you lift your car? Somewhat easily. Why? Because you have a powerful tool to make what's difficult relatively easy. So yes, it may be difficult to go from ignorance to pure, but we have a powerful tool, and that is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Holy faith and hope and confidence we should have. But it is up to us. We have to walk the road.
Prabhuji, one last question, if you have time, I don't know. That was the last verse which we had, that madness Prabhupada used in 10.8. So could you clarify on that, because more in hinting towards the mode of passion, but what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning is more on the mode of ignorance part of it. So if you could clarify what he said and how to.
Yeah, so madness is a state of mind where one, again, doesn't have any clarity of what is right, what is wrong. They're completely delusional, right? It's a mental state, right, that we have, a very sad state of madness, different forms of it, right, where we lose our cognitive ability to understand reality. But madness is this state of mind that is what I think is right is wrong, and what I think is wrong is right. That's basically madness. Now, when one is in this ignorance and madness, it can lead to one to perform intense endeavor to accumulate things that are not productive. Let's take, for example, to accumulate intoxicants. Right? We know drug addicts will go through extraordinary efforts. Right? So that effort itself is in the mode of passion. But the state of consciousness is in madness. So just like one in the mode of passion who's working very hard for material gains, there's heavy modes of ignorance there. Right? Because they're pursuing unwise things. Right? So again, we're a blend of all three. Okay? So when I think Prabhupada talks in the purport, he's referencing, people are madly accumulating money and working very hard all day and night. That working hard all day and night, that is, they're being fueled by the mode of passion there. Right? So that is the energy. The work that was intent is driven by the mode of passion. Right? But the consciousness that's driving them there is this madness. Okay?
Yeah. It's basically lack of intelligence. So that is the state of
Yeah, and that's mode of ignorance, right? When we say ignorance, we're ignorant of what? Not what tomorrow's lottery numbers are going to be. We're ignorant of who am I and who is Krishna? And what is my relationship? Right? So again, that's why you cannot be squarely in the mode of passion either. Right? Because you have to have some ignorance to fuel that desire. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, and like in mode of passion, one might be intensely working, right? But they may have a very charitable goal for their money. Right? They may want to make all this wealth to make the world a better place. It's in the mode of goodness. But the means is through the mode of passion. That desire is burning and intense. Right? So you can see these, you can see now how these mix. It's not one-dimensional. Yeah.
A healthy competition in devotion service, is that driven by mode of passion?
No, healthy.
And then how do we define healthy and unhealthy?
Yeah.
That's a key thing.
So it's very important to understand the motive. So the gopis of Vrindavan are always competing. But their competition is transcendental. When one gopi is serving Krishna and able to please them, they become happy. Why? Because they don't care that they weren't served. Their only goal is Krishna's happiness. Single goal is Krishna's happiness. But But by seeing that gopi render service, they become inspired. Let me follow in their footsteps. Not, let me bring this person down. Because who loses if they bring that person down? Krishna. Krishna loses. Right? When Krishna left the gopis, and the gopis are searching for all of you, Mataji sung, I think, Gopi Geet recently, right? You should know that they weren't anxious to see Krishna for their happiness. They were lamenting that Krishna would be unhappy. So transcendental competition is how we can inspire each other to please Krishna more. And Prabhupada instituted one of the most competitive things he can do in the morning prayer. Anybody know what that is?
Book distribution.
Book distribution service. Every morning, read. Devotee act, boom, 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 boom. Why he did that? To inspire that, wow, this person is doing great. Let me learn from them. How are they being so successful? What can they do? And devotee who is at the lead isn't thinking, I have to protect my position. That's material. I don't share. Otherwise, I'll not be number one tomorrow. A devotee is happy when others are able to serve more. Devotee doesn't become territorial. Or this is mine. No. Simply how others can do more, that makes them more happy. So this mood of competition it's a wonderful thing because it's so important that in our sadhu sangha, association with devotees, we see this in the in environments. We see the good and the bad competition. The bad competition, let me try to make it difficult for someone so that they'll not. Why are we venerating Krishna? We should facilitate. Right? And we can become inspired by someone's success, not envious of someone's success. That is the key. When someone is having success, we should celebrate that and be enthused. It should enrich us. It should give us faith. Wow, this is the power. And maybe with what they're doing, maybe I can. And if we're having some success, we should not think, oh, lock up the secret. Should try. The goal should be to make everyone more successful than themselves. That should be the goal. How everyone can become. Why? Because Krishna will get more service. So this transcendental competition is healthy, but it must be very carefully applied. Again, if Krishna is the center of everything becomes clear. Everything becomes so clear. As soon as I try to put myself in the center, then things become awry.
It's neither I nor we, it's a Krishna. It's neither I nor we, it's a Krishna.
Krishna should be the, and that's why we study the great devotees, the acharyas. We see their mood and how they were. I mean, one of the most heart-touching examples in Chaitanya Charitamrita is Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was so enthused in seeing everyone enjoying darshan of Lord Jagannath, but he could not go. Can you imagine? Everybody else could see the beautiful Lord Jagannath, and he could not go. But he was enthused to hear of the kirtans and the ecstasy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, burning, fingerprints into the pillar. All these wonderful pastimes. Enjoying prasadam in the garden, being served personally by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's hands. And Haridas Thakur was in ecstasy. Why? Seeing the devotees receiving this mercy from Krishna. And what was his gain? How did Krishna reciprocate with him? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to go see Lord Jagannath every day. And then who did he go see? Krishna came to him. By some, inappropriate thing, he could not go see. Krishna came to see every day. And when he left this world, who personally carried his body, washed it in the ocean, bathed him in the ocean, and placed him in samadhi. So if you study Haridas Thakur in Chaitanya Charitamrita, particularly in Antya Lila, there's amazing, glorious verses. You see this mood, and the great devotees, they have perfected this mood of this celebrating the success of others. That is what we must come to, that purity of heart. Actually, otherwise bhakti is not sweet. It's like if I have a nice sweet rice, perfectly cooked rice, fresh cow milk, so much sugar, perfect sugar, everything. Sorry, I'm so nice. But if you put 1 tablespoon of salt in it, I'll make it work. You put 1 tablespoon of sand in it. And not get the taste of that sweet rice, because that's sand. When we have envy of devotees, when we have this, idea of, this unhealthy competition, we have this, it makes our own experience in bhakti tainted. We won't get the sweetness of bhakti. If we're practicing devotional service and we're not relishing this rasa, maybe this is something that we won't get the sweetness. It's like putting sand in your sweet rice. But if we study Shastra, we'll see the perfect mood of these devotees. Perfect mood of how this happens. This competition is good because it inspires us all to serve Krishna better. Rath Yatra festival is coming up. We have this very sweet, so many wonderful devotees. You are one of them. Several others are gaining advertisements for Lord Jagannath. And I relish those things. And it's fun to watch everyone celebrating everyone else's successes. But it's also inspiring, right? Oh, I should get one more ad. We become enthused. That's good. Right? Celebrate the success of it and become enthused ourselves. Yes, I can do it. And this mood, how Krishna reciprocates. Sure, I could talk about this topic for another hour, so I'll end on that. But it's a very important topic. Maybe one day we'll do a class on Haridas Thakur and discuss this in a little bit more detail because it's so important. In sadhus and in devotional circles, we see this this mode of ignorance and passion coming in, and it's not good. Keep Krishna at the center. Any other questions? Comments? Yeah?
Did you cover the ones online?
No.
Anyone else have?
No, go ahead.
Sorry. Does the 3 modes of material nature is equally influential in all upper lokas? If yes, then how the people in those lokas are different compared to our loka?
So in the higher planetary system, there's more prevalence of mode of goodness, less prevalence of mode of ignorance. But again, mode of goodness is still binding. It's just, you can live a longer life, more beautiful forms of whatever we deem beautiful here, it pales in comparison to the beauty in the upper heavenly planets. What beauty is a form of having a good mode of goodness. So there are higher degree, but again, it's still water in the footprint of a calf compared to the ocean of bhakti. So it's a better place than here in that sense. But the problem is, why the demigods themselves desire to come to the earthly planet? Because amidst all that opulence and amidst all that relative happiness, it's very difficult for the inspiration to take the bhakti to manifest.
Even though if we are in the mode of goodness or mode of passion, however, if we work for the pleasure of Krishna, does it mean we are transcending to pure goodness?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. Even though if we are in the mode of goodness or passion, however, if we work for the pleasure of Krishna, does it mean we are transcending to pure goodness?
Yes. As soon as you are working for Krishna, you are at least transcending the modes, and you may have tinges of passion and ignorance in your activities, but you have transcended the modes, but you're not yet pure in devotional service. So, yes, that is the key, is to bring Krishna into the center of our activities, and naturally all these modes will become purified. We're not going to purify in any other way. But when we come to Krishna consciousness, we have to do our part. We have to proactively purify ourselves from these modes. And that's why we have to understand them and see, oh wait, in my devotional service, yes, I'm there, but I'm having these mode of ignorance tendencies because I am, stealing flowers from somebody so that I can serve Krishna better. Not that would ever happen. Or, we're making chapatis and I'm going to take all the atta, nobody else has any left, so I can make them. Not that would ever happen. So, it happens, but we should work to purify.
Last question. Can I say modes of material nature is nothing but Maya? If we have to transcend this Maya, then do we need to be selfless and all the time thinking and working for Krishna, which will enable us to transcend? In order to achieve this kind of state, association with devotees, studying Srila Prabhupada's books, serving Lord all the time is the only way to come out of this mode of material nature?
So, keeping Krishna in the center of all of our activities makes it transcending the modes 24/7. But remember, a pure devotee goes to the office also. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was a great magistrate. Srila Prabhupada was a pharmacist. So you can go to the office and work, but what is the goal of that work? It should be Krishna. But if the goal of our work is, okay, I'll do a little bit of my Krishna consciousness and the rest of my time is other activities, well then it's not pure. So being pure in bhakti doesn't mean that, I'm full-time in the temple. Because if you're full-time in the temple, but your mind is constantly thinking about all the things that you left and all that, then you're not in the temple. Right? So the point is, whatever ashram we're in, whatever situation we're in, we use in serving Krishna. So in home life, family life, work life, it's all an opportunity to be fixed 24/7. So when we say 24/7, we say, oh, it's not practical. No, it's practical. Because the practicality is just changing our consciousness. Just like we have to change our, we can pray to change our consciousness that this instruction that we are reading is non-different from Arjuna's, Krishna speaking directly to Arjuna as we have here. It's no difference. When we read this verse, Krishna is speaking directly to us. No difference. Very cool. Anything else? Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada.